if I can feel someone else's pain so quickly and so easily, then the work is actually more about self-empathy and self-compassion so that you can extend that off to somebody else.
Welcome to Awaken Her, the podcast where women find their strength and transform their pain into power. I'm Carissa Stepp, your guide on this journey of healing, growth, and empowerment. Here we share the real stories of women who have faced life's toughest challenges and emerged stronger, together with expert insights to light your path forward. Whether you're seeking to heal, grow, or empower your life after heartache, Awaken Her is here to show you that not only is change possible, but you are capable of achieving more than you ever imagined. Let's dive into today's episode and take another step towards becoming your most empowered self.
When we teach people how to be empathic, we're helping them focus on what they feel in connection with how do they feel when someone else is expressing their thoughts and emotions. So true empathy isn't ignoring your feelings. It's the opposite. It's like going, deep into your own experience of what you're noticing you feel as you're listening to your partner. And so if somebody has experienced trauma or their own feelings have not been validated, then we have to be very careful of honoring our own triggers and honoring if there's some feeling that doesn't feel safe, that we don't just plow through it and focus on what the other person is thinking and feeling just because we're trying to be empathic. So it's a delicate balance. And Daniel Goleman is really considered the father of empathy. He's done so much research about it, and he differentiates it into three different levels of empathy, right? And so the first one is cognitive empathy, and that's, I get it. I can wrap my brain around why you feel what you feel. And the thing about the cognitive empathy is sometimes that's a little bit of a safer place to start, because you're just saying, okay, I'm going to try to understand you in terms of my intellectual perception of what you're explaining to me, right? And then the next level is then I'm feeling what you're feeling. So that's called emotional empathy. And so that's sort of, I feel your pain. And we can all relate to that sort of if you are watching the news and you're hearing about a flood and you start to tear up, right? You're not experiencing a flood, but your emotions are authentically reacting because you have empathy for these people who are suffering from the flood. So that's sort of the next level down. And then the third is empathic concern. And that's where your own world stops and it's like your partner's in pain and your own world, really you put aside whatever's going on for you and you're 100% really thinking about what does my partner need and willing to kind of attune with them and not think about what you would need in that situation, but your partner well enough that you're able to just say, I'm here for you and I can figure out, knowing who you are and what your love languages are, what's going to be supportive. But in order to have that happen, there has to be first the intellectual understanding of why you're in pain. Secondly, to have the emotional attunement. And then thirdly, to be able to do that. So I would think that, if somebody is experiencing trauma or if they had a past toxic relationship, it might not be safe for them to go to that third deep level because they might, put the other person above themselves and have their own suffering. So it's something to do in a slow, gradual process where you've tested the waters and you know that it's safe. So generally, I recommend that, as you're getting to know someone and increasing your intimacy, you test out, like, how does this person respond when I'm being vulnerable? And if they are reacting with empathy, then that shows me I can share a little bit deeper. And that's how you're slowly kind of circling down to that level of depth so that nobody's doing a deep sea dive and risking emotional injury. In my opinion, I'd love to hear what your experience is, or if you, wanted to add to that, or maybe,
Yeah.
tweak it a little bit.
So I guess I have, my first question would be, in the instance where, you are kind of like dipping a toe and showing a little bit of vulnerability to see how your partner kind of responds, right? So that it feels, to test to see if it's safe enough, right? Emotionally, to kind of go out on a little bit of a limb. You know, what kind of response would we hope to get from our partner that would show us that they are empathetic, or they're showing, this empathic concern? Because here's the thing that I was thinking about. A lot of the women that I speak to who have experienced trauma from relationships, right, and in their childhood, a lot of them actually have a high degree of empathic concern. And what happens is they try to then rescue the person who's in pain, right? They try to go out of their way to alleviate the suffering of this other person because they feel it so deeply as if it's their own. And they have a
Correct.
hard time. It's almost like an enmeshment, right? Which
Yes.
happens back from childhood. It's a pattern that's familiar where maybe there was an enmeshment with a parent or a caregiver.
Yes.
So they tend to just take it on as if it's their own. On the flip side of that, they can also end up sitting in a victimhood state where it's always someone else is doing it to me. And I don't feel the empathy that this other person may be acting from a place of a wound that they hold.
Yes. Yes.
And not be able to see that, this person is not maliciously trying to hurt them, potentially, right? Depending, it all depends.
Sure.
And they get stuck. They get stuck in that victimhood and they feel really stuck. And they don't know how to get themselves out of it. And then they look for someone else to rescue them from the situation as the victim.
Right. So this process, and I'm so glad you're bringing this up because it's a question that often comes up when you're just looking at the skill development of this is how to be empathic, right? Validate, paraphrase, emotionally empathize. All of those skills are things to do in a healthy relationship where there's a balance, and that way you're receiving the same thing back from the other person. If there's an imbalance, then it is not recommended to follow that course of empathy because you risk your own emotional injury. So this idea of like, I can feel, if I can feel someone else's pain so quickly and so easily, then the work is actually more about self-empathy and self-compassion, so that you can eventually, extend that off to somebody else. But if you're not honoring your own emotions and feelings, then it's going to be very, very difficult to actually authentically emotionally honor someone else's feelings, because then sometimes it's coming from a place of fear. Like, I need to take care of you so that you don't leave me and then my needs will be met, as opposed to really doing the work to understand I'm good enough, I have self-worth, and my feelings are just as important as your feelings.
Yeah, definitely.
So ultimately, that's, when we get to a place where we're empathizing, but we're coming from being grounded in self-compassion, then it's the true empathy. Because if the empathic concern is my world stops when you're in pain, that's coming from a place of I'm grounded in a secure relationship that has commitment and trust, so that I am not putting myself at risk for like letting go of my pain. So, that makes sense. If my partner was, had a trauma happen at work where somebody, God forbid, somebody got cancer or something, and I had a really bad day because I had a lot of clients and I didn't get time to, take my lunch break, then then that's a balance, right? For me to like not be, not worry about my own day and my own stress, but to be able to really be there for my partner and in that grief or that fear or whatever that experience was that they were having at work. But if I feel like I can't talk to my partner about my own stressful day because I'm like, oh, it doesn't matter. I just saw a lot of clients where your pain was so much worse than mine. That's not what this is about. It's all about sequence and timing. So then, I'm not going to choose that moment to talk about my stressful day if my partner is, feeling intense pain. But I know that there's room for me to also just be like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even get my full, lunch hour, and just have my partner really empathize with that stinks. Like, I know you've been really working on this and it's hard for you to set your boundaries and, whatever kind of compassion that partner would provide. So the warning sign is if one starts to contain their own feelings, feel like they're not as valid, or there's some kind of a hierarchy, ultimately, which is different than a day-to-day hierarchy. And sometimes I help clients with that because it feels like, well, we want our partner to be there for us. And sometimes they're distracted or sometimes they're having a hard day. And that doesn't mean that they don't love or care about us. It also just means, okay, there's a time and place for things. And you want to make sure that you're having deep emotional conversations when everybody's in this space to do it. So I think capacity is different from timing. And sometimes it's really useful to remember, like, okay, my partner can be empathic, but none of us can be empathic 100% of the time. And then we put a little less pressure on them.
Thank you for tuning in to Awaken Her. Today's conversation may have ended, but your journey towards healing and empowerment is ongoing. Remember, every challenge you face is an opportunity to grow stronger and more resilient. If our stories today inspired you, consider sharing this episode with someone who needs these empowering messages. I'm Carissa Stepp, cheering you on as you take the steps to heal, grow, and transform your life. Keep believing in yourself, and until next time, stay empowered.